Παρατατικός και αόριστος. So in this slideshow, we're going to take a look at the past tense verbs. There are two types. I'm using the technical terms here, the imperfect and the aorist tenses. For those of you who've studied English grammar, the imperfect is called the past progressive or the past continuous. The aorist is called the simple past. The difference, as we'll see, is that the imperfect talks about something that was happening. I was sleeping, I was going to New York, I was playing. But when we use it, we don't know if it's actually finished. It's usually for an interrupted action. So I was sleeping when you called. We don't know if I ever finished sleeping. It's what I was doing at that time. The aorist, or the simple past, talks about something that was a completed action. I went to New York. I woke up at 8 o'clock. It happened. It was finished. So there are very specific rules. I won't go into all of them here. This is just a general overview. But they are used not so differently than they are in English. So it shouldn't be too difficult. They're just some patterns that we need to memorize. So let's go over the progressive system first, the ing system. And we'll take a verb like παίζω. Now it's very important that the first four letters, πες, are in red. I've highlighted them because that's the verb stem. The omega, or anything else that comes after this, will be modified to tell us who is doing it, will be changed to tell us who is doing it. The omega at the end means that I'm doing it. So παίζω is both I play and I am playing. And we know these endings. Παίζω, παίζεις, παίζει, παίζουμε, παίζετε, παίζουν. You'll notice that πες never changes. Only the endings change. And you can see that we have I play, I am playing. You play, you are playing. Now, some books will say this is also I do play. We're not going to go into all of the details. Now, if we want to make the future progressive, the future ing, this is all we're going to do. Θα παίζω. And you'll notice that πες is still the same. I will be playing. So we're talking about at some point in the future what we will be doing. We'll be in the process of doing something. At 8 o'clock, I'll be eating dinner. At 4 o'clock, I think I will be sleeping. We don't know if I'm going to finish these things. We're just talking about what's going to happen at that one time. All that we need to do to build this is take the original form, the present tense form, and just put θα in front of it. And θα has an interesting little history, but we're not going to go into it here. So, θα παίζω, I will be playing. Θα παίζεις, you will be playing, and so on. The endings are exactly the same as they were in the present tense. The only thing that's changed here is we've added θα, which, for all intents and purposes, we'll say is will. Θα equals will. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's good enough for now. Now, when we go into the past ing, the imperfect, έπαιζα. Now you can see we've made a few more modifications. Okay, but the πες is still the same. So έπαιζα is I was playing. That's the imperfect one. I was playing when it started to rain. She was playing when her mother told her to go inside. Okay, these are unfinished actions. They're interrupted. They're incomplete. And the imperfect is also used in Greek to talk about something that was our habit or our custom in the past. When I was young, I used to watch the Smurfs every Saturday morning, for example. Or I would go home right after school and do my homework. Well, we've had to make a couple of modifications this time. First, we moved the accent mark to the left. That's important. Okay. We move one syllable to the left. So you can see that if you look at peso, the accent mark is on the iota. Tha peso, it's still there because we haven't changed that form. But now we've gone from pes and we've dropped it over here, one syllable to the left, epeza. Now, if the accent, if the oxia falls later in the word, so for example, if it happened to be here, we would move over this way, and this epsilon would not be necessary. There's a very technical term for that. We're not going to concern ourselves with it now, but the accent moving one syllable to the left is important. So we move our accent mark. We change the verb ending. So we are no longer going to use these endings here, which we also use here. We have a new set, kind of like a new set of Legos that we're going to snap on to pes. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a vowel to the beginning. Now, usually it's an epsilon. It doesn't have to be. It could be an epsilon iota. It could be an eta. But we're just looking at the general rules here. We need to do what's called augment. We have to augment the verb. Put something in front of it. So now we have epeza, epezes, epeze, pesame, and you'll notice that there's an optional epsilon there, pesate, epezan. The rules of the accents are covered elsewhere, so I'm not going to go into them here. But what is important is to note the changes that we've made. In red, you'll see our new endings, and we have our accent shift where it was necessary. Okay. I guess I should mention it again here. The reason why in pesame and pesate the accent doesn't move is there's a rule in Greek that says the accent must be on one of the last three syllables. Now, the last three syllables have special names: the ultimate, the antepenult, the penult, and the antepenult. Or actually, there's another set of names for them as well. The accent has to be there. There is no Greek word without an accent on one of the last three syllables. So it's got to stay for these, because if it moved over to the epsilon, we would lose it. Okay, back to being general, which I promised to try to do earlier. Let's look at some verbs and see if we can build them in this progressive system. All right, so now let's take a look at some examples of verbs. So we have the aforementioned peso, I play or I'm playing. If we want to say I will be playing, θα παίζω. And if we want to say I was playing, έπαιζα. Βάζω, I put or I place. If I want to say I will be putting or I will be placing, θα βάζω. I was putting or I was placing, έβαζα. Λύνω, I loosen or I am loosening. I will be loosening, θα λύνω. I was loosening, έλυνα. And remember, it's I was loosening or I used to loosen. I could loosen. I would loosen rather. Okay, it was something habitual, something regular in the past. Kovo, I cut. I will be cutting. Thakovo, I was cutting. Ekova, Beno, I enter. I will be entering. Thabeno. And when I say enter, it means I will be going inside, not I will be plugging in data or something like that, like I'm entering information. This is going inside, going into a vehicle or a room or something, a building, something like that. So beno, thabeno, ebena. Jorevo, I dance. I'm dancing. Thajorevo, I will be dancing. Joreva, and you'll notice that the epsilon here is optional because if you look at the last three syllables, chorev, ah, we cannot vacate this omicron. We can't leave that oxia because if we move it over to the left, then we'll have no accent on the last three syllables, and that's a no-no. Okay, we can't do that. Greek is pretty strict about that. Okay, so choreva, though you could say echoreva, nobody would think it was strange. Grafo, I write, I'm writing. Thagrafo, I will be writing. Egrafa. So this one's pretty easy because remember all of the red letters, these stems, don't change. Now let's take a look at something else. We just finished looking at the INGs. I will be doing something. I was doing something. Now we're going to look at the simple tenses. And what that means is we're going to talk about things that are completed actions or something that will be completed. And most of the rules are still the same, but there's a very important difference. Let's go back to peso. I play or I'm playing. Now if we want to say I will play, we need to change the consonant, the last consonant sound before the omega. So pez will become pex. And that makes all the difference because now instead of saying I will be playing at some point in the future, maybe tomorrow at 5:30 I will be playing, now we're talking about something that is probably going to happen once and it's probably going to be finished. Okay? The rest of the stem is still the same, the ending is still the same, and we still need tha. So that consonant sound, and you'll notice I'm not saying the last consonant, I'm saying the last consonant sound. You'll see why in a moment. Ta pexo, I will play. We're adding tha to the present tense form, and we're changing the last consonant sound to one of the S letters. Now let me explain this. Greek has 4 letters that are considered members of the S family. Of course, we have our sigma, which is just S. And the sigma, when it's the last letter in a word, like right here, looks a little bit different. It takes on a different form, like this, which you can almost imagine. You don't have to try too hard to imagine that it's an S. It also kind of looks like a C. Okay, although C's have a slightly different story. So one of our S letters is the obvious one, the sigma. But we also have psi. Ps. This is a late letter in Greek. Before this letter was created, we had this. Ps. And it was decided that it was just inefficient to write this as two letters, so they invented this one. So we've got S and Ps. We also have Z, which doesn't sound like an S, but actually it's formed exactly the same way. And I'll teach you a little trick. It's really just a sigma with a hat on it. Now that's not why the zeta looks like that. There's a completely different reason actually for the way it looks. But if you can just imagine that you're really looking at an S with a hat on it, you won't have any trouble forgetting the zeta. Almost exactly along that same line, you've got the xi, which I think of as a C and an S. And if you want to, you put the hat on it. And the xi, of course, is the x sound. And at some point early in Greek history, it was written like this. K, s. It was considered inefficient to write it with two characters, so they invented this one. Now, there were no lowercase letters in ancient Greek. The important thing here is that the S sounds are going to be used to help us make the simple future and the simple past. Now, I just told you about 4 of them, but there are only 3 that we need to worry about here. And you can see them over there on the right as I struggle to erase all of this stuff here. Oh, this wasn't very smart. So, reading that last note, one of the S letters, ps, the psi, x, the xi, the zeta is grayed out because we don't need it here, and the sigma. So, peso now becomes thapexo. The other modifications that we made are still necessary, namely the addition of the tha. That plus the changed consonant gives us the simple future. I will play. Now it's not I will be playing. Well, when we want to build the past, we borrowed the new stem that we created here. This is going to go over to the other side to help us build the past. So, peso, thapexo, epexa. We have our stem, we have our past ending, which we mentioned before. We have the epsilon, that augmented vowel, because the oxia that used to be here had to move over one syllable, right? And of course, we have our new consonant, epexa. I played. So we moved the accent mark to the left. We changed the verb ending. And we added a vowel to the beginning. So we have epexa, I played, epexes, epexe, pexame, pexate, epexan. All right, well now let's take a look at some examples of simple verbs. And remember, by simple, I don't mean that they're easy, I mean that they refer to completed actions, or actions that were or will be completed. Παίζω, I play, I am playing. Θα παίξω, έπαιξα, I played. Διαβάζω, I read or I study. Θα διαβάσω, διάβασα. Λύνω, I loosen. Θα λύσω, I will loosen. Έλυσα, I loosened. Κόβω, I cut. Θα κόψω, I will cut. Έκοψα, I cut in the past. Ψάχνω, I search. Θα ψάξω, I will search. Έψαξα, I searched. Χορεύω, I dance. Now you'll notice that before the omega, there is no consonant here. But there is a consonant sound because epsilon and epsilon make an ev or an f sound. So we have to imagine that there's something like a vita here. The vita is not really there, but the sound is there. So chorevo, the rule tells us we've got to add some kind of s sound. Well, chorevso doesn't really work, but we could use the chorepso, which is pretty close. Echorepsa. And again, remember the rule of the accent. It's got to be somewhere on the last three syllables. So we can't move it to the epsilon. We can't say echorepsa. That would violate the rules. Okay, and then grafo, I write. Now, if you remember something that I've mentioned in previous slideshows, phi is one of those late letters. Originally, phi was written like this: p and h. This is not the ita that we know from later Greek, not just modern Greek, but it could be the Greek of 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. There used to be an H. Modern Greek has no H now. So this was probably pronounced at some point as grapho, grapho. And by the way, this is where we get our pH from. It was considered inefficient to do this, so they created one letter. Okay, there's a reason for everything. Grafo, well, the rule tells us we've got to add a sigma sound. Well, let's think about this. We have a p, h, p, h. And to go to the simple future, the rule says we have to add a sigma. Well, pus, pus. H's we can easily imagine are silent, and we're left with a p, s, p, s. Gives us the psi sound. Θα γράψω. And we're going to take that whole stem and go all the way back here to use it again. Έγραψα. Now there are so many verbs that fall outside of these patterns. Some of them will keep some of the rules, some will completely violate them, some will look totally different in their other principal parts. So there is a lot of memorization, but there is some logic, involved as well. I think the important things to remember are the differences, both in Greek and in English, between the past ing and the simple past. I was doing something versus I did something. I will do something versus I will be doing something. Fortunately, in Greek, we catch a break. There's no difference in Greek between I am playing and I play. They're written the same way, fortunately. As for the rest of it, we have a little bit of memorization to do. There are rules for many of these, whether we use a psi or a sigma or a xi to determine the future. Okay, there are rules for them. We're not going to get into those now. I hope this helped you more than it confused you. Telos.